It is my great honor to introduce our keynote speaker for this year's Scam Jam in Bangor. First elected to the U.S. Senate in 1996, Senator Susan Collins has earned a national reputation for working across party lines to seek consensus on our nation's most important issues. You will not find someone more committed to her work in the U.S. Senate than Susan Collins. When the snowstorm earlier this year hit Washington and most folks took a snow day, Senator Collins showed up to work. And how many senators have the distinction of never missing a vote? As the chairman, some applause up front. As the chairman of the Senate Special Committee on Aging, Senator Collins is confronting head-on the issues impacting older Americans, whether it's funding for Alzheimer's research, providing support to family caregivers, or protecting against age discrimination. She has taken a particular interest in combating scams that target seniors, making this issue one of her top priorities. Under Senator Collins' leadership, the Aging Committee maintains a fraud hotline that serves as a resource for scam victims and documents reports of fraud. Based on the data collected by the hotline, the committee recently unveiled a comprehensive anti-fraud resource guide entitled Fighting Fraud, U.S. Senate Aging Committee Identifies Top 10 Scams Targeting Our Nation's Seniors. And we're glad to be able to give all of you a copy today. The guide contains tips on ways to identify and avoid common scams, and you'll please take a look at your copy. Senator Collins has also held numerous hearings on some of the most pervasive and pernicious consumer scams. Through these hearings, she has sought to assess the government's response to these scams and raise awareness among seniors so that they can protect themselves from becoming victims. On behalf of our more than 230,000 members across Maine, AARP Maine applauds the Senator's dedication to fighting scams and fraud in our state. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our Scam Jam keynote speaker, Senator Susan Collins.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here with you. Is the mic working now? We're okay. Okay. Lori, thank you for, I've lost her. Thank you for that very nice introduction. I want to commend AARP for hosting this event, and particularly Lori and Rich Livingston, who's the Maine State President, and Jane for her great presentation that we just heard as well. It's also terrific to have many representatives from law enforcement, consumer protection, and the area agencies on aging present today. My thanks also to Maine Public Broadcasting for making this important information available to listeners throughout our state who couldn't be here in this room today. But I have to have a very special thanks to David Leach and Will Lund, who's going to be speaking later, who worked with me years ago when we were all together in state government at the Department of Professional Financial Regulation. They were at the Consumer Credit Protection Bureau, and I'm delighted that they're still there carrying on. And Judith Shaw has been a wonderful help to us. She is the Securities Administrator of the state of Maine and has come down and testified at our hearings. As Lori mentioned, I chair the Senate Special Committee on Aging. It's a position that I sought because Maine is the oldest state in the nation by median age. And issues affecting older Americans were not, in my opinion, getting the attention that they deserve. A particular focus of our committee is stopping fraud and financial exploitation targeting our seniors. This problem is immense. America's seniors lose a staggering $2.9 billion every year to an ever-growing array of financial exploitation scams and schemes. With the wave of baby boomers now a silver tsunami of retirees, it is no mystery that financial fraud targeting seniors is considered the crime of the 21st century. In response, the Aging Committee has published this guide on the top 10 scams targeting our nation's seniors. We've brought copies enough for all of you today. Please feel free to take them home with you. The guide is based upon data that our committee gathered last year through our special fraud hotline. Staffed by experienced fraud investigators, and Tim Stratton, who runs it, is here today. The hotline last year received more than 1,000 calls, more than 1,100 calls from seniors all across the country, from every state in the nation. Yesterday, however, we set a record. The hotline received 153 calls in one day. I think that shows you what a huge problem this is. We hope that our report is helping to raise awareness of these threats to our seniors and their families, and it also sends a powerful message to scammers that they are being hunted down and will face justice. The number one complaint last year was the IRS imposter scam, in which criminals pretended to be IRS agents and they threatened victims with arrest or foreclosure on their homes by falsely claiming that veterans owe back taxes or other fees. And it's estimated that this scam has cost innocent victims who did not owe any back taxes more than $36 million, averaging more than $5,700 per victim. And as was mentioned earlier, IRS may not be your favorite agency, but they do not call up and threaten you the way these scammers do. If you truly do owe money to the IRS, you're going to get a letter in the mail detailing it, giving you an opportunity for contact and for appeal. They're not going to be calling you up, threatening to send the police over to arrest you or put a lien on your bank account or foreclose on your house. Now, what makes these scammers particularly pernicious is they often use a disguised or spoofed telephone number to make the victim believe that the call really is coming from the IRS. We demonstrated this during our hearings, where one of our staff people spoofed the number of the Treasury Department in D.C. onto my cell phone. I looked at my cell phone, and there was no way you would have been able to tell that that was a call from a scammer. It said Department of Treasury, and it had a 202 Washington, D.C. number. And that's why all of us who always relied on caller ID and do not call lists as a means to protect us from these kinds of calls have found that technology has gotten around them. By the way, this tax season, my own mother received 3 of these calls on her cell phone in one afternoon. She's 88 years old and lives in Caribou. And she knows enough from watching what I do to hang up each time. But it is a form of harassment that sometimes wears people down. Well, imagine my surprise when about a month ago, I came home, as I do every weekend, and on my voicemail, my home right here in Bangor, were 3 of these scammer calls, pretending to be from the IRS. Well, I was thrilled, to tell the truth, because I thought that I could participate in a sting and get these criminals. So 2 of them left to return phone calls, and I eagerly turned them over to the Inspector General. And I can't tell you how excited I was, because I was sure that he would give me a script and then we would be able to catch these guys. And only to find out that all 3 of the phone calls, the phone numbers have been disconnected. They were good for only 3 days. And I mention that because it shows how clever these scam artists are. They clearly had disposable cell phones, and they were just tossing them out and using a different number. I thought it was odd that it was 2 different numbers that were left, because apparently the first one had already expired and I hadn't called back. Nevertheless, I'm delighted to report that just last week, our efforts to combat this scam produced spectacular results. On May 23rd, based on a lead provided by our committee's fraud hotline, the Treasury Inspector General and the FBI arrested 5 individuals in connection with the IRS imposter scam. And isn't that great? And listen to this. Federal authorities believe that these suspects scammed almost $2 million from more than 1,500 individual victims. This was a ring of people all operating together out of Miami, Florida. Now, let me tell you how this came about. The arrest stemmed from a call to our fraud hotline last October. And the caller reported that her husband had recently been contacted by an individual claiming to be from the IRS and demanding immediate payment of alleged back taxes. Well, the husband was so distraught by the idea that he owed $2,000 allegedly that he was instructed to drive to the local Walmart to get a debit card to get the money to the IRS, and he crashed his car on the way. He was that upset at the idea that he owed money. But he was so convinced that the scammer was an authentic IRS agent that he left the scene of the accident to wire the payment in order to avoid the scammer's threat of possible legal action. Meanwhile, the wife got suspicious about this, called our fraud hotline, and we were able to trace, we couldn't stop the wire transfer, but we were able, this was a transfer from a Walmart store to a Walmart store rather than a debit card in this case. And we were able to trace the wire transfer to a Walmart's in Minnesota. And we reported the information to the Treasury Inspector General. They sent agents to Minnesota who pulled the surveillance tapes, and they were able to identify the 2 individuals who came in to pick up the money. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to be part of. Except for I wanted to go be there when they were arrested, too. So that investigation allowed them to unravel this ring and led to 3 additional suspects, all of whom were arrested in Miami and charged with wire fraud and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. So that, to me, is the victory that I am proudest of from our fraud hotline. But I also believe that we've stopped a lot of people from being ripped off, and that's the best approach. Prevention is the best approach, because as the sheriff said, a lot of times these scam artists are not even in this country. There are boiler rooms in India, for example, that we've found, or the Jamaica lottery scheme. And law enforcement at the state, county, and local level just cannot get at those individuals. It takes the Justice Department. And we've been working hard to push the Justice Department to make this more of a priority. Our year-long campaign to combat the IRS imposter scam is bearing fruit in other ways too. When we first began this investigation, it was estimated that the IRS imposters reeled in 1 victim for every 60 threatening calls. Now, thanks to increased public awareness and the work that AARP and others are doing, it takes a con artist 400 calls to trick someone into falling for this scam. Still, that is far too many victims who are losing their hard-earned money and often their retirement savings to these criminals. So the sweepstakes scams, the Jamaican lottery scam that we heard about, was number 2 on our top 10 list. And what we did here is we put pressure on the Justice Department to start taking this seriously and to extradite to our country some of the people who are involved in this scam in Jamaica. And they now have prosecuted and put in prison one of the Jamaicans who was a ringleader of this scam. But I also took matters into my own hands. I talked with the ambassador to Jamaica, and I told him that if they didn't crack down on these con artists operating out of Jamaica, I would personally lead a boycott of tourists going from our country to Jamaica. And I truly believe that was instrumental in the Jamaica legislature passing tougher laws, because if they don't get American tourists, they are in big trouble for their economy. The third most common complaint was robocalls, unwanted phone calls, usually people trying to sell you something that you don't need. And that's why we need to get the telephone companies to get this new technology out there, because the do not call list that we all used to register on doesn't work anymore. It's been overtaken by technology. Computer tech support schemes rank 4th. That's when you get a call from someone pretending to be Microsoft or Dell and telling you that you have a virus that they can fix, and you just need to pay them $250. And you know, I worry that people like me who aren't good with computers could fall victim to that kind of scheme. But here's a worse variation of it. It's when they ask for information that allows them to get inside of your computer. And then if you do online bill paying, as I do, they can get access to all of your accounts. And so that is very pernicious as well. Identity theft, grandparent schemes, elder financial abuse, or other frauds. I want to say a word about the grandparent scheme, where the con artist calls up and tells you that your grandson or daughter has been robbed, and they pretend to be that person. And, they'll call up and say, Grammy, I'm really desperate. You'll think, well, that doesn't quite sound like Jimmy, but maybe it is Jimmy. Is that you, Jimmy? Oh, yes, this is Jimmy. That's how they'll suck you in. Well, I'll confess, about 6 years ago, I got an email from someone purporting to be my nephew, Mark. Well, it sounded just like Mark. It said he was overseas, had been robbed, and his passport, his airplane ticket, and all of his cash had been stolen. And could I please wire him some money to the local Western Union office? Well, I guess I'm not a very sympathetic aunt, because I really thought it was for real. This was before these became more publicized. And I wrote back and I said, Mark, you should go immediately to the American Embassy for help. I did. Then I started thinking about it, and I called his father and found out that he was right in town and where he was supposed to be. But I may have been a little cold-hearted in saying go to the American Embassy, but that actually is good advice if you do ever get in trouble overseas or one of your loved ones does. Don't automatically wire money. But let me elaborate on a particularly tragic example, the absolutely worst scam that we've uncovered in our 1.5-year investigation of these scams. I recently chaired a hearing where we heard the heartbreaking story of a 77-year-old Maine man, a retired pastor named Byron Martin from Dresden. He was tricked in what is known as a romance scam. He developed this online relationship with this person named Joy, who knows if it was Joy or even a female for that matter, who over months developed a relationship of trust and affection with this individual. And she asked for money at times. He was living just on Social Security and living with his daughter. He had no money to spare, but he would send her some money from time to time. To make it seem real, she'd send some back occasionally. Well, then she struck. She told him that she needed someone to go to Peru to pick up a package of documents related to real estate so that she could sell some property that her parents had left her, and that she was in Europe and could not travel to Peru for some reason. Now, by this time, Pastor Martin was trying to break up the relationship with her because he'd met another woman who lived locally. But he decided he would do Joy this one last favor. After all, they'd become fast friends for months. So he goes to Peru, meets supposedly with her lawyer, who gives him a wrapped package. He puts it on his lap for the next leg of the flight to Spain. And he's actually in a wheelchair with this wrapped package on his lap, going through customs and immigration and the scanners, and he gets pulled aside. Well, it turns out that the wrapped package that he was given and never opened contained not important real estate documents, but rather concealed cocaine. So he was immediately arrested. He was tried and convicted, even though he had no idea. And he is now in prison in Spain, thousands of miles away from his loved ones and in poor health. And the Department of Homeland Security testified at our hearing that he's an innocent victim, but Spanish law does not require proof of intent. All they had to show was that he had smuggled illegal drugs into the country, which seems terribly unfair to me. So our committee was so outraged by this that we've written a letter to John Kerry, Secretary of State, asking him to ask the Spanish government to parole him on humanitarian grounds. He's in bad health. He needs surgery on his back, and to get him pardoned or otherwise released. And we are checking on this every week. And we do seem to be making some progress, and I am hoping we can get him released and back home. But I'll tell you what is such a tragedy here. The people who perpetrated this crime are out there free, undoubtedly tricking more people, while an innocent victim is languishing in a Spanish jail. And that is outrageous. So the people who should be in jail, and we believe this is an international drug cartel, are the perpetrators who trick unsuspecting seniors into being drug mules. So while progress has been made in countering scams, it's evident that much more work remains to be done, and new scams are cropping up all the time, as you will hear from everybody. These con artists are infinitely inventive. You close one down or alert people to another, and another variation pops up. And that's why I'm so proud of the state of Maine for, as usual, leading the way with seminars like this and with the Seniors Safe Law, which trains tellers at credit unions, at banks, and other financial institutions to recognize signs of financial exploitation and fraud. In one case, an alert credit union teller noticed an older woman had not been making her regular visits to the bank, and she was found bedridden and neglected by her alleged caregiver. In another, a bank teller noticed that an attorney writing large checks to himself from the accounts of 2 senior clients. That attorney is now in prison. So a critical component of the Senior Safe Law is training people, but also saying that they don't, if they report to the right authorities, they don't have to worry that they violated bank privacy laws as long as the reports are made in good faith, are based on fact, and they've been trained. So we've introduced legislation at the federal level to try to take that law nationwide. Bottom line, our parents and our grandparents have worked hard their entire lives and saved for their retirement. They should be enjoying their golden years, and they should not be targeted by criminals who want to rob them of their hard-earned savings and investments. While law enforcement, consumer protection, and aging agencies, AARP, and financial institutions have vital roles to play, an aware and informed public is our first and best line of defense. So I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to be here today and join in this common cause as we protect our seniors. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your comments.